everybody. I hope you are having a great day. My name is Allie, and I am here for the free Manhattan Prep LSAT hour. Can you just say hello in the chat window if you can hear me? Awesome. Hi, Christina. Hi, Justin. Nice to meet all of you. Thank you for coming out tonight. We are going to go ahead and get started in just a moment. All right. Okay. So you should now be able to see a nice little slideshow, and this is where we're going to get started. So my name is Allie, and I have been teaching LSAT with Manhattan Prep for about 8 or 9 years at this point. I'm excited to be here with you tonight. I am joining you from San Francisco, California, so I might be on a slightly different schedule than some of you. If you enjoyed this class and you're interested in trying some more free prep options, just wanted to throw some out there for you. You have the option to try a live LSAT class. Session 1 is available for free as a trial for anyone who registers on our website. And it's a full 3-hour class, and you get a really good feel for what our actual courses are like. You can also try our LSAT Interact course, which is in sort of a cool interactive video that gives you adaptive feedback as you learn LSAT content. Tonight we're going to be working on logic games, which is one of the most intimidating parts of the LSAT for many people. We are going to be doing a basic ordering game that has some funky twists in it. And we're going to be doing some logic games questions and working on the most important skills that there are in logic games, which are mastering the major types of questions out there: orientation questions, conditional questions, and unconditional questions. And then we'll have a little wrap up at the end. So just let me make sure I can see you all's chat. And we're going to get started with a actual logic game. So you're going to need a pen and paper with you, and I'm going to be timing you all, and I'm going to give you about 3 minutes and 30 seconds to complete this logic game. So let me just make sure that you all are seeing it, because I'm getting some funky error messages. So can you just type like yes or thumbs up in the chat window if you can see this slide that says make a diagram, questions 11 through 17. Cool, glad. Okay, so if you've never done a logic game before, welcome to the wonderful world of logic games. If you have, this might be a familiar feeling for you, but most logic games start with sort of a little scenario where you have to read the rules and figure out what type of diagram is going to be the most useful to you for organizing the information. So I'm just giving you the scenario right now. There are no questions, but I will be giving you some questions in a few minutes. Normally when you're doing the diagram of a logic game, you kind of just want to focus all your attention on that diagram and give yourself a solid 2.5 to 3.5 minutes to make a really good diagram before you even start doing any questions. So all I want you to do right now is read this setup, and somewhere on your scratch paper, make a diagram that makes sense to you, make any inferences that you're able to make. All right, your time is starting now. All right, that is 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Go ahead and put your pencils down and let's talk a little bit about your diagram. Before I show you my diagram, I'd like to hear from you about what you found unusual about this game. What twists did you notice as you were setting up, or what was the hardest part of this game, the diagram? Take a minute to type in the chat window. What did you find unusual or challenging about this setup? Okay, it's the uneven distribution. Wait a second, see what everybody else says. Okay, different locations in the week and conditions for places. So yeah, it does kind of seem like you need two diagrams. Yep. Yeah, it feels very open-ended. So let's talk through how you would set this up. When I first read a new logic game, the first question that I'm asking myself is this a game that's asking me to put things in order, or is it asking me to put things in groups? And I ask myself that because that's going to determine what type of board I'm using here. So think about that for a second. Do you think this game is asking you to put things in order or put things in groups? Tell me in the chat window. Yeah, I agree. This game is definitely asking you to put things into order. And you can see a lot of that from the language in the rules. So we're being told what's going to go in week 4, what's going to go in week 7. We get that each voyage will occur in exactly one of the first 7 weeks of the seasons. Each voyage will be to exactly one of the 4 destinations. So you can kind of imagine week 1, we get one destination. Week 2, we get a single destination. Each week we want to place one destination. And we also get some ordering language in the rules, words like preceding, between, consecutive. Those are all words that indicate we're going to need to pay attention to order here. So the first thing we want to think about is how many spaces do we need on our number line? You probably came up with a 7-space number line, maybe something like this. But then when you start to try to put things on the number line, you notice that there are only 4 locations. So whenever there's a mismatch between the number of elements that you have to put on your number line and the number of spaces, you really want to be careful. There are a couple of things that could be going on here. One is it's possible that there are going to be empty spaces. So you want to reread to see if there's anything that indicates that every space in your diagram has to be full. When I do reread, it tells me each voyage is going to occur in exactly one of the first 7 weeks, and they're scheduling 7 voyages. So to me, that sounds like there needs to be a voyage every single week. So empty spaces doesn't sound like an option. In this case, I have too few letters for my board. So if the spaces aren't empty, the only other option is that I'm going to have some repeats. And so you can see that the way that I chose to handle that is that I put some question marks. So I have 4 letters that I know are going to be used, and then there are 7 spaces. So I put 3 question marks to indicate some of those letters are going to repeat. And this is my very first, most basic initial setup. Once I kind of decided that that's what my board is going to be, then I start diagramming the rules. So I'll show you a little bit of what I did, and you can check your diagram against mine. There are always variations on logic games diagrams, so just because I made my diagram in one particular way doesn't mean it's the only way or even the best way for you. It's just a way that works for me. So if you have something different, and you want to check it out and see like would my way work too, just type it in the chat window. But I'll talk you through what I have here. So Jamaica will not be the destination in week 4. I usually indicate rules like that with just a little slash. Oops, I'm sorry. I'm going to go back. Don't do those questions. Okay. I usually indicate those with a little slash under the space, so J is not going to be in 4. And if possible, I always try to put rules directly on the diagram. So that's why I have a little rule box over here for anything that doesn't fit on the diagram. But since J is not in 4, fits directly on the diagram, I put it there. It's going to be easiest for me that way. T is in 7, also goes directly on the diagram. This next rule I can see just from glancing at it that it's long. Anytime that I see a long, complicated looking rule, I make sure I slow down and I read it a couple of times before I actually jot down my notation for that rule. And then even once I have my notation, I check it. The reason for that is unfortunately just one little mistake in your notation can really crush your performance on a game. It can make you really struggle through every single question if you misinterpret one rule. So, okay, Freedom's going to make exactly 2 voyages to Martinique. Okay, so I went ahead and changed my little letter bank down here. Now I have 2 M's, and I took away one of the question marks. One of the repeats is accounted for. At least 1 voyage to Guadalupe is going to occur in some week between those 2 voyages. Now I have to be careful here. I know sometimes the LSAT likes to give me chunks. Something like, okay, it's going to be M followed by G followed by M immediately. But that's not right in this case because it says in some week between those. So I don't know if it's going to be right between them or if there's going to be some space. So over here in my rules box where I put the things that don't go directly on the diagram, I indicated that using some dashes. So the dashes are there to tell me there's some stretchy space in between M, and then the G in between, and maybe that rubber band of stretchiness is going to go all the way out, or maybe they're going to be smushed right next to each other. I also wrote out that there's going to be 2 M's. Just sometimes redundancy is helpful when you're writing down your rules. Make sure you don't miss anything. Guadalupe is going to be the destination in the week preceding any voyage it makes to Jamaica. So this one, again, I had to think carefully about how I decide to notate it. If I just write GJ, then to me that looks like I'm just going to have like a whole line of GJs. But this is a rule that is triggered by Jamaica, right? So I could have a G followed by another letter like M maybe. And that would be okay. What wouldn't be okay is if I have a J and the J is preceded by another letter besides G. So the way I write a rule like this is if there is a G, then that G is going, if there is a J, J and G are always tricky. If there's a J, there's going to be a G preceding that J. And then no destination will be scheduled for consecutive weeks. The LSAT likes to use rules like that. Anytime I see the no consecutive rule, I just use an XX side by side with a slash through it. One other thing that you may be able to see on my diagram is I put a J with a slash in space 1. Does anybody know why? Why can't J go in space 1? If you know, type it in the chat window. J doesn't have to follow M. Yeah, so this goes back to rule number 2. If I have a J, there needs to be a G before it. So one of the classic types of inferences that you can make on basic ordering games is a falling off the end inference, which means if I have some kind of chunk like G before J, I imagine what would happen if I were to put it on the end of my diagram, like here in space 1. Well, if I were to put a J in space 1, there would need to be a G before it, but the G would fall off the end of the diagram and we would just lose it completely. So that means that J can't be in space 1. Now it looks kind of like you might be able to make a similar inference with this MGM rule, like maybe say G can't go in 1. Does anybody know why we can't make that inference? Why can't I say, well, M would fall off the end if I were to put G in 1? So no G in 1. Yeah, nice. So when a game allows repeats, things get really tricky. I might have 1 G that's in between the M's. I will have 1 G in between the M's, but I could potentially have another G that shows up outside of the M's. So a lot of the standard inferences that you would make if this were a non-repeating basic ordering game fly out the window. And so because of that, when you have repeats, a lot of times you're not going to have a whole lot of inferences set up on your board before you go into the questions. I'm going to pause for a moment and just kind of open up the chat window for a couple of things. One is any inferences or differences you see on your board that you want to bring up and talk about. Maybe there's something I missed. And second is any questions you have, anything that I said that you want to hear it again, or you're not sure why my board looks the way it does. And if you're all good, you can let me know by just typing "I'm good" into the chat window. Cool. Okay. Looks like everybody I'm hearing from is good. If another question pops up in a minute, then I can certainly get to that question. But I want to take you all now into the actual LSAT question so you can start using your diagram. So the first question is what we call the orientation question. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. But I am going to put up a poll for you to be able to choose your answer A through E once you have done this question. So I'm going to give you a minute so that the poll's not blocking your screen or anything, and then you'll see the poll pop up when your time is done, and I want you to pull in your answer. So 1 minute starting now. You should just see one question, number 11. Can you see that question? A black box over the portion of, okay, is that any, oops, hold on, maybe that's just the chat. Give me 1 sec. You see a black box too. Okay. Is that any better? No. Okay. I'm going to stop the screen share for a second, and you'll just see my video, and I'll start it again and see if it's any better. Okay. Let me know if that's better. Great. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Sorry about that. I'll restart your timer. All right, it has been a minute, so I'm going to launch a poll. Apologies if that blocks your view. Go ahead and choose your best answer. And if you don't have an answer yet, take a guess. E cuts off for you? Okay. If you want to pick E, just type it into the chat window. I'm not sure how to fix that. Okay. So I've got 4 responses in, and I see several different responses from the folks who have put in their results. So let's talk strategy on a question like this. So I called this question an orientation question. And the reason for that is the LSAT has a lot of patterns in logic games. And one of the patterns is that the first question after you set up a diagram often looks like the one that you see here, where you're asked what would be an acceptable, complete setup for the game that you're working on. And we call this an orientation question because it's the question that kind of orients you to both the game and the rules. It allows you to get a feel for what is sort of what's going to work in this game. Now, a lot of folks approach the orientation question by going one answer at a time. So G, J, M, T, G, M, T, and checking it against the rules to see if it breaks any rules or seeing if it matches up with their diagram. And if you tried that way and you ran out of time, the good news is that there is a faster way to do it. And there's one that is kind of easier on your brain, and you always want to take the easy approach whenever possible on the LSAT. So the most reliable method for you to use on an orientation question is called the rule by rule method. And I'm going to demonstrate it for you, and then I will check in with all of you to see what you think. So the rule by rule method means I start by just looking at the first rule. I know I just spent all this time making a beautiful diagram, and I really want to use it, but the diagram is not going to be the most helpful thing for me on this particular question. The text of the rules is what I'm going to go for, and I'll talk more about why in a second. You'll kind of see. So I go to the first rule. J will not be in week 4, and all I do is put that rule in my head, and I go through each answer choice just checking to see if J is in week 4. So J is not in week 4, A is okay, B is okay, C is okay. Oh, D has J in week 4. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate D. Now, typically the way these questions work is one rule will eliminate one answer. So I could check E, but it's probably going to be most efficient for me to just move on to the next rule. So T is supposed to be in 7. Take a quick scan through the rules and tell me which answer choice can you eliminate based on that? Yeah, nice. That was super fast. And that's how fast you want to be going on this question. So you see that T is not in 7 on E, you eliminate. Okay, so then you go to the third rule. F is supposed to make 2 voyages with a voyage to G in between. Or I'm sorry, 2 voyages to M. So we're going M, G, M. We're checking that rule. So I check A, I see M, G, M. Good, yeah, nice. You're faster than me, Teresa. Cool. So B is out based on that. So then I move on to my next rule. If there is a voyage to Jamaica, then there needs to be a voyage to Guadalupe before it. Anybody see any problems with that one? C. Yeah, so Jamaica is there in space 1, and we made that inference that it couldn't be because we can't have Guadalupe before it. Nice. So I don't even need to check answer choice A. I just know that is the correct answer because it's the only possible answer remaining. So this process for orientation questions is super reliable, super efficient. It's a great way for you to get all of the orientation questions right. And I usually tell my students this process, by the time that you're good at it, it should take you 30 seconds or less. A great way to get good at these is to just replay orientation questions, or even you can go through a logic game cold with no diagram at all and try the orientation question just based on the rules. I'm going to pause for a second if you all have any questions or thoughts about this strategy for the orientation question. And while I'm waiting, I'll show you just a little recap slide. If you are taking notes out there to help yourself learn, this would be great stuff for you to jot down. Okay, not seeing any questions, so hopefully this means you are all now prepared to get 4 easy points on all of the orientation questions for each logic game that you do. This will be the only orientation question that you see tonight because there's usually only one, although sometimes you will encounter another question later in a game that looks kind of like an orientation question, and you can approach it using only a rule-by-rule elimination strategy. So keep that one in your toolkit and be flexible and be ready to use it at other opportunities. All right, we're going to take a look at another type of question now. Let me know if you have any problems seeing this one, but if not, I'm going to give you a minute, and after a minute, I'm going to put up the poll. Okay, that is a minute. I'm going to launch the poll. When you're ready, go ahead and put your answer in or take your best guess. Okay, so I see 4 answers, and again, don't be afraid to just throw up a guess. That will just tell me that you're still working on it. Okay, I'm going to stop the poll. Thank you, everybody who put your answers up. And let's, thank you, and thank you to the folks who are typing in your answers into the chat window. That's perfect too. All right, let's chat about this. So this question is the second major type of question on the logic game section of the LSAT. It's called a conditional question, and there are tons of them. You're going to see several of them on every single logic game that you do. So it's really important that you have a super solid process for how to approach a conditional question, regardless of what type of game you do. So when I say this is a conditional question, what I'm thinking about is how there is a little bit of new information that we get. We call it a condition. So a conditional question is always going to start with if, the word if. and it's going to give you a little bit of new hypothetical information. I love these questions because they finally give you something to work with. It's like, okay, thank you, LSAT. I can put something onto my diagram. Your strategy for a conditional question should not be to do this in your head. That is extremely difficult to do, and most people are not able to do it without making mistakes, including myself. Instead, your strategy should be to sketch a new diagram. It's kind of a mini version of your original diagram. You're going to add the information that you've been given, and then you're going to use a systematic approach to make as many inferences as you can. Now, the reason you sketch a new diagram is because your original diagram is precious. And if you write some information on here about, you know, G is in week 1 and J is in week 5, all of a sudden you don't have a copy of your original diagram anymore. You've changed it. And this information is only valid for one question. So even though it takes a little time, it's really important that you write a new diagram out for this type of question so that you don't mess up your original and that you're able to think through your work in a systematic way. So I'm going to go ahead and add G to week 1 and J to week 5. And then the next thing that I would do is start going through my rules one at a time where I notated them and making inferences. That is why I put numbers next to my rules, 1, 2, and 3. I do that on paper too when I'm actually playing logic games, so that when I have a question where I need to make inferences, I can just be like, okay, first rule, second rule, third rule, can I figure anything out based on that? Type in the chat window, what inferences can I make now that I've put G and J on the board? Nice, Justin. Yeah, so rule number 2 gives me that if I have a J, a G needs to go before it. So I'm going to go ahead and put a G in space 4. But when I scan through my answer choices, I see that that's not going to be enough to get me to the correct answer. They have G in week 6, but they don't have it in week 4. So that means I'm going to need to do a little bit more thinking. And one thing that I always gravitate towards on these basic ordering games is any long strings or chunks of letters. So when I say a string, I mean like my M, G, M string, those 3 letters in a row. When I say a chunk, I mean how like G and J are next to each other anytime that J shows up. So I'm going to need to be able to fit M followed by a G followed by an M on the board. So I'm just going to start like thinking about where those letters could go. I know that my first M could go, you know, over here in space 2 or space 3. I've got a G. I can't have consecutive letters, so I can't, you know, squeeze another G in space 2 or space 3. So basically what I'm going to end up with is I'm going to have one of my M's somewhere over here. And then that's going to force my other M here into space 6 in order, that's kind of the only way that I'm going to be able to have an M with a G and then another M after it. So 2 M's with a G in between. And based on that inference, I'm able to choose answer choice E, that M is going to be in week 6. So after you've made all the obvious inferences on a conditional question, the last step is to kind of ask yourself who's left and what do I know about those letters. In this case, we know that our 2 M's were still left, among other things, and that we needed to be able to space them out so that there would be a G in between and they wouldn't be next to each other, violating Rule 3. So that's how we can arrive at answer choice E. If you have any questions, type them in the chat window while I put up this slide to recap the big stuff you need to know about conditional questions. So a conditional question is always going to start with the word if. It will give you some new information. and you should make a quick sketch with the new information and then follow the inference chain. For the G in week 1, wouldn't J follow immediately after? So the GJ rule is a super weird one. It's triggered only by J. So the way that the rule is worded is if Jamaica has a voyage, then we have to have Guadalupe before it, but it doesn't work in the other direction. It doesn't say that if Guadalupe has a voyage, Jamaica has to come after it. So just because I put a G in week 1 doesn't mean I need to put a J in week 2. And the LSAT likes to make tricky rules like that, that are kind of, they hinge on one letter in particular. And that's why we use this notation, the sort of the J followed by the arrow and then the GJ to clear that up. It's kind of super tricky. Yeah, glad that was helpful. Okay, so the third and final type of question that you're going to see in logic games on the LSAT is the unconditional question. And that looks like this. So I'm going to give you about a minute. You know the routine. I'll have you pull in your answer when you are done. Okay, here comes your poll. All right, nice work. This was our best question yet by far. 5 of you answered, and most of you got this one right. So let's talk a little bit about what type of question this is. So this is an unconditional question, which means that you are given no new information at all. So unlike the last question that we did, there's no if, there's no new piece of information for you to put on your diagram. And while you all did very well on this question, a lot of times folks' instinct when they see a question like this is just to kind of panic. They're like, what? I don't know. Like, you look at your diagram and you're like, my diagram doesn't say any of these things. I really don't know what to do here. So it's really important that you have some solid, foolproof strategies for these types of questions. The biggest thing that you want to know is if you are trying to prove that something must be false or must be true, as you are in this case, you're trying to prove that something cannot be true, so that it must be false is another way to put that. Your general strategy is to attempt to disprove the answer choices. And there's a lot of ways that you can do that. You can do that by finding a diagram that you've created somewhere else in your game so far that shows that that answer choice doesn't have to be false or doesn't have to be true. You can do it by glancing at an inference that you already made that shows that that doesn't have to be false or true. Or you can do it by creating a hypothetical scenario that's going to prove a certain answer choice doesn't have to be false or doesn't have to be true. So when I look at number 12, I say, okay, I'm looking for something that cannot be true. So for each answer choice, I'm going to approach it and be like, come on, LSAT, I don't think that really has to be false. I think it could probably be true. Let me see if I can show you how it can be true. And what's going to happen is I'm going to test that answer choice. So for answer choice A, I'm going to be like, okay, I think it probably could make a voyage to Trinidad in week 6. And either in my head or using a quick news sketch next to letter A, I'm going to put T in space 6, and I'm going to see a problem. What's the problem? Those of you who caught it, type it in the window. Rule number 3, yeah, so we can't have 2 consecutive voyages. And that's going to show me that actually this really can't be true. There's no way for me to show that it can be true. It's not going to work out. And lucky me, I only had to test 1 answer choice in order to get the correct answer, which is A. Now, oftentimes, that's not going to be the case. So let me just show you real quick what it might look like to try an answer choice that actually can be eliminated. So for answer choice B, if we're making a voyage to M in week 5, then what I want to do is try to prove that that is actually okay, that that can be true. So I'm going to put M in week 5, and I'm going to try to follow the rules and create a board that works. And this is kind of haphazard, like I'm just doing it as I go. I know I need to have this MGM string, so I'm going to go ahead and throw those up there. Let's see, I need to use every single letter, so I'm going to put a J in 2. I'm going to put a G before it, not because it has to be there, but because it can be. And then I need to use 1 more letter in 6. It can't be M or T. There's no room for J, so we're going to have to maybe use another G. And then I check it against the rules, and I see if there are any problems with it. Doesn't look like it to me. Let me know if you see any rule violations that I made there on accident. But once you have created a diagram that works, that tells you that you can eliminate an answer choice. So you're kind of just doing your best to follow the rules as carefully as possible and creating a functioning diagram. All right. If you have any questions about that one, okay, is it okay if we happen to check A? And so, yeah, absolutely. Great question, Christina. So I was showing you answer choice B just for teaching purposes, because a lot of times the answer is not going to be A, and I want you to know what it looks like to eliminate a wrong answer. But best practice on the LSAT for logic games only is once you find the correct answer, you want to go ahead and move on. If the answer does happen to be A, a lot of times I'll just reread the question real quick to make sure I didn't get flipped around and like prove it, true when I needed to prove it false or vice versa. But yeah, you definitely would not go through the process of verifying, all of the other answer choices. If you found the answer choice was A, you just count your blessings and you move right along to the next question. Awesome question. Thank you for asking that. So to recap, unconditional questions give you no new information. The one that we were doing was a must be true or false question. And when you are being asked what must be true or must be false, you're going to attempt to disprove. Sometimes logic games will ask you what could be true or what could be false, in which case you're going to attempt to prove each answer choice true. The fastest ways to do this are sometimes you'll be able to just glance at your diagram and see that something has to be true or false if you've already made the appropriate inference. And sometimes you'll be able to use your previous work. So I always give my previous diagrams a skim over anything I've made for an unconditional question or the orientation question. And then if you need to, we do what's called plug and chug, which is where you test each answer choice one at a time using either the attempt to prove or the attempt to disprove, whatever is appropriate based on your question type. This, I would say, is the single biggest thing, aside from diagrams, that slows people down on logic games. So it seems really simple, and it's really important that you know all of these steps. So I highly recommend that you make some flashcards to teach yourselves these strategies so that when you see those questions and the answer's not quite as, right in front of you as it was on that last one, that you know what to do. All right, so you all are doing really well. So I'm going to give you a timed question set now. You've got 2 questions. Oops, sorry. you've got two questions. They are two different types of questions, so think about what you've learned so far, and I'll give you 2.5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. Since we're getting close to the end and I want to make sure that we get through both of these questions and do a good review, I'm not going to put up the poll this time, so honor system. Definitely let me know, though, if you have questions or confusions after we go through them. So hopefully you were thinking about your question types as you were approaching each of these, and you noticed that question 15 was a conditional question, and question 17 is an unconditional question. So I'll go through the first one first. For a conditional question, remember you want to be setting up a quick sketch of a new diagram and including the new information you've been given. So we've got G in week 1 and we've got T in week 2. And then we want to follow our chain of inferences. So remember that the last time we did that, we found the string and looking at the remaining letters very useful. So based on my letter bank, I've got a G, I've got a T. I know that I'm going to have a J and 2 M's. And my 2 M's, according to rule number 1, need to have a G between them. So if I start kind of sketching this out up at the top, I know I'm going to have an M, a G, and an M that need to fit in spaces 3 through 6, since I can't use that first G to go in between the 2 M's. And my rules did tell me that every letter has to be used. So I know that I'm also going to have to use a J. And according to rule 2, that J has to come after a G. And my only option for that is going to be right after this G that's going to get placed on the board. So thinking that through, I have 4 letters that are going to go in 4 spaces. So I actually know exactly where each of those letters is going to go. And when I put those letters down, I have a complete board and I am ready to choose my answer. And the correct answer to number 15 is A. That M is going to be in week 3. Okay, so key move there is really thinking about your long strings of letters or your chunks. Once you've placed the relevant letters on the board, where can those remaining things go? If you have any questions, type them into the chat window. I'm going to get started talking about number 17. For an unconditional question, one strategy that you can use to move a little faster, because you don't want to have to test all of the answer choices if you can avoid it, is to strategically choose your answer to start with. So strategically choose your starting point. If I'm looking for something that has to be true, then I want to think about which of my letters have a lot of restrictions, which of them are most likely to be kind of forced into a certain place or a certain situation. So to me, the letters that seem the most restricted based on my rules are M, because there has to be exactly 2, and I know something about their order in relation to G, and then J, because J is always going to have that G right before it. And all the other letters are a little more flexible. So if I was picking, I would say I'm going to start with either answer choice B, because it deals with M, or answer choice D, because it deals with J. So I'm just going to clear off my board real quick. And so we're starting with B or D, because it uses those highly restricted letters. And it's a must-be true question, so I'm going to attempt to disprove by showing that that answer choice could be false. So I want to use M, but not use it in week 2 or week 3, and show that I could still make a working board. So maybe I throw M in spaces 1 and 4. I know that I'm going to have a G in between, so maybe I'll put a G right here. Ooh, maybe just to make my life a little easier, I'll move the G over to space 2 so I can go ahead and get my J on the board after a G. So then I just need to be able to find something for 5 and 6. Can't use M anymore. I could do maybe T again and G right here. Or I could swap that out for another G, J combo. As far as I can tell, I'm not breaking any rules. Let me know if you think I am. But it seems like as I scan back through my rules, I've got my MGM string, my G before J. I don't have any letters that are consecutive. So it seems like it doesn't need to be the case that I have M in week 2 or 3. So I'm going to eliminate B and move to my second most promising answer choice, which is D. So I'm doing the same thing at most 2 voyages to Jamaica. If I am attempting to disprove this answer choice, then I'm going to see, is there any way I could get more than 2? So I need to get at least 3 voyages to Jamaica on here. Now I know Jamaica can't go in 1 or 4 or 7. So I'm trying to get 3, and there's only 4 spaces left. That makes this answer choice look pretty good, because it's going to be hard to get 3 on the board here, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. So maybe I'll put a G with a J right here. Then I know I'm going to need to do my M, G, M rule still. So I'm going to need M, G, and an M. That's going to take up 3 of my spaces. I'm only able to get 1 more J on there. And if I think about it, if I need to have 2 M's that are going to fit somewhere on this board, and then every time I have a J, I'm going to have a G before it, then at most I'm going to be able to put 2 J's on the board, and that would still take up 6 spaces between my 2 M's, the G that comes before the J each time it comes on, and then of course space 7 is taken up by T. So that tells me that I do have to have, no more than 2 voyages to Jamaica. So answer choice D is the correct answer. All right, if you have any questions, put them in the chat window as usual. I'm gonna start wrapping things up for you all. You did an awesome job. So to recap, we dealt tonight with a game that has a pretty tricky ordering twist, but one that's becoming more common in recent LSAT games, where you have repeated elements on an ordering game. So when you look at your setup for any ordering game, make sure that you're really attentive, not just to what type of diagram you should be using, but to what's going on with the mismatch between the number of elements and the number of spaces that you have. Definitely also make sure whether you are just starting out with logic games or you're, kind of winding down your LSAT prep, that you are really solid with your processes for all three of these question types, that you not only know what to do, but that you're actually implementing those processes when you're doing a logic game. If you need to do some work on any of these things, here are a few strategies you might use. Create some flashcards for the different question types that we learned tonight. There's an example down at the bottom of the slide. Logic game replays are a great way to improve your time and to make these processes more automatic. Just pick up some conditional questions that you've done before and run through and do those and work on your process. Do make sure that you master the fundamentals, that you have these processes down before you really start trying to do super hard logic games, because being really good at these basics is what's going to make you really good at super hard logic games. And make sure you're always incorporating both timed and untimed practice. So you should not be only doing logic games untimed, but a nice healthy mix of time practice as well. More time practice the closer you get to your tests. Yeah, Clarice, it really is a super helpful method. Focus on the restricted rules is normally going to help you kind of narrow it down. More so for the last question, yeah, that's for unconditional questions. So when you're looking at what must be true or false and you've been given no information, you look at the most restricted rules and try to narrow it down to a couple of answers that way. And a lot of times that will be making your process much more efficient. All right, so we're gonna wrap things up. Should not have a black screen. If you're interested in checking out any of our upcoming courses, there is the link. If you have additional questions for me, feel free to stick around. I'll be here for another 5 minutes or so. If not, thank you all so much for joining me tonight, and have a lovely evening. Bye, Zoe, thanks. Teresa, yeah, there are going to be more free prep hour webinars. So just check our website to see when the next one is going to be. Yeah, they're all on, we try to make sure they're all on different topics. Cool, thanks. Justin, are you still here? Can I just talk to you about the answer to your question? Cool. Yeah, so our webinars are kind of varied in difficulty, but we don't post the topics in advance, so you wouldn't be able to tell, like, by looking at our calendar what is the topic going to be. If you're looking for more advanced stuff, I mean, I'm trying to think, $50 classes for our website. Yeah? Okay. I'm not familiar with those. Crunch Time. Oh, yeah, Crunch Time is cool. So what Crunch Time is it is kind of like a 1.5 hour total recap of everything you need to know about a particular section. So we have one that's a total recap of everything for reading comp, everything for logic games, and everything for logical reasoning. So it's not necessarily going to be more advanced. It'll just be more comprehensive. If you were looking for more advanced instruction, that would probably be something that you would get more from the courses or from the Interact videos that are available on the website. Okay, cool. That is a good question, Clarice. It has been recorded, and I think it's, oh, you know what it is? It's going to be posted on YouTube, which is a little scary for me. But you can look for it on YouTube. I should stop recording now.